Newt Gingrich wasn't the fiery Newt Gingrich who had so riled up the folks in South Carolina.
When Newt Gingrich isn't on the attack, he isn't very good. And I think having won in South Carolina, he was kind of a little immobile tonight. That answer that he gave about the Freddie Mac lobbying was terrible. He didn't answer the question at all.
By the way, Howard Feynman and most of the other people on NBC went on to say they didn't think it changed much, that this debate was kind of a wash. Well, does he do his own wash, though? That is my question about Newt Gingrich. Does he do his own laundry? These are the important things that people want to know about. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, candidate for the presidency, joins us now. Hey, Speaker Gingrich, how are you?
How are you?
Do you do your own laundry?
Yes. In fact, I did it Sunday. We came off the road for a day so we could do the laundry.
Oh, so you actually don't, but you don't tweet your pictures like Romney does?
No.
I don't want a president who has time or a candidate who has time to do his own laundry. I want you to have other people do your laundry. I'm sorry that we just think it's hilarious. No, we don't need Tide spokesmen, okay? Speaker Gingrich, obviously we watched the debate last night, and you seemed a little subdued for all of those out there who liked seeing the fighter Newt with a couple zinger one-liners, and you seemed to hang back a little. Why?
Well, part of it was the format. They had been instructed beforehand not to applaud. The room was much smaller. It was, I don't go in and automatically do things. I go in and try to feel the mood and feel the situation we're in. And I was happy to occasionally, get something in on Castro or get something in on Iran or something on job creation. But the debate didn't lend itself to that. And then second, this was Romney's night to be desperate. And my job was to, frankly, not make a major mistake and let him pound away and pound away and pound away until he disgusted people. And I think from our perspective, it worked reasonably well. Now, I must confess, had I known that he owned stock in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I probably would have had a pretty good zinger at that point. But we didn't learn that until we left the debate last night. But we had people, I literally had a man walk up to me on the way out who said he had a Mitt Romney sign in his yard, but he was now voting for me because he was so disgusted with Romney's dishonesty. And I think in that sense, I got one of the major things I wanted to do was just get across again and again that Mitt Romney does not tell the truth, and that in desperation, he does exactly what he did 4 years ago, and which we have a commercial out with both Mike Huckabee and John McCain talking about the fact that Mitt Romney doesn't tell the truth.
Now, one thing that is popped up today is that a number of your contracts with Freddie Mac are missing. They've gone missing. What can you tell us about that?
I have no idea. I mean, that's the only thing I can tell you. We released a contract. It was a standard contract. I think the other contracts were all exactly like that. And I have no idea where they are.
But doesn't Freddie Mac, presumably they have copies of the contracts that they signed with you, right?
Presumably they do, and I'm sure that we'll ask them if they'll release the copies because they're exactly the same contract. But if you'll notice, the contract does not call for me to lobby, doesn't mention the word lobby, and all of a sudden you have Romney out here flailing around, saying things that are clearly not true, and saying things that are frankly offensive. I mean, it was an interesting experiment in biting my tongue when the guy next to you is saying things are false, and he's deliberately, apparently has a new debate coach, so he's deliberately saying so many false things in one sweep that you would end up using the whole evening just trying to defend yourself. Now, we're going to put up a Romney's falsehoods at newt.org and just take each one of his things and explain why it's false and move on. My interest is to talk about how we'll defeat Barack Obama, how we'll create jobs and economic growth, how we'll get back to a balanced budget, how we'll have an American energy plan. I mean, things that I think matter to the American people and not get mired down in the sort of the trivial kind of politics that Romney's currently playing.
I empathize with that greatly. I mean, I believe the American people deserve a debate about critical issues, like how are we going to be competing with China when China does what China does and what we do to our businesses? And how are your plans different from Romney's or Santorum's on how we compete globally? And that would be nice. But that having been said, Speaker Gingrich, you've been around long enough to know that the negative attacks, as we saw in Iowa, end up having an effect. And when you were, Mr. Nice Guy in Iowa, you dropped like 17 points in the polls. So when they come at you with these questions, again, I'd rather talk about China and Russia personally. But when they come at you with, why didn't you report to the CEO or some other person? Why did you report to the head of lobbying at Freddie Mac if, in fact, in essence, you weren't a lobbyist?
Well,
I think you have to answer that.
It's the head of government relations, not the head of lobbying. And they're the ones who came to us and said they'd like advice. So, picking up Romney's mischaracterizations and pursuing it from there just extends the dishonesty. I've said over and over again, we have never done any lobbying. We brought in a specialist to train our entire team so they would never do any lobbying. I am deeply committed to being a public citizen. I have been my whole career. And so I don't mind speaking out on issues, but I don't go to anybody and say, let me rent my reputation. I say, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm interested in. And I'll be glad to give you advice on the terms of what I believe in.
So are you going to tell the Freddie Mac folks to just release those extra contracts that you guys can't find?
Well, I'm sure that they'll go back and ask them for them.
So, but will you guys?
And I don't, frankly, I didn't know until this morning. And I didn't know until you just told me this. So I'll go back and ask what the deal is.
Okay. Mitt Romney was asked a question.
By the way, let me just point out, he hasn't really, he bought all the hard drives of all of his computers when he left the governorship, which he has never released any of the documents about RomneyCare. He presumably bought them because he was afraid the Democrats would do something with them. He doesn't release anything about Bain. They've never released anything about Bain working with the Bank of Iran, which they apparently did in 2004. Romney has not released any contract of any kind involving any consulting he did. So it's a pretty one-sided standard we've gotten into here.
So why didn't you say that last night?
Because I was watching Romney be Romney. The only point I wanted to make last night was that he was dishonest.
Going back to, there's a question that Brian Williams asked about conservatism that I found interesting, and let me hear this question and answer. Go ahead.
Governor Romney, what have you done to further the cause of conservatism as a Republican leader?
Well, number one, I've raised a family. Number two, I've worked in the private sector. And then I took an opportunity to become governor of a state that was slightly Democrat. We cut taxes 19 times.
He went on to say that he reached across the aisle to fight for conservative principles. Last night, you kind of let that stand. Your response today?
Well, it verges on hysterical. Mitt Romney has never done a single thing to favor the conservative cause. In 1992, he gave money to Democrats, not Republicans. He voted in the Democratic primary for Paul Tsongas. He said he didn't want to go back to the Reagan-Bush policies. He said he wouldn't sign the contract with America. Now, this is a guy who frankly, was a liberal who ran to the left of Teddy Kennedy in 1994. As governor, he was pro-abortion, pro-gun control, pro-gay rights, and pro-tax increase. So he talks about 19 tax cuts. He raised taxes $720 million. The state ranked 47th in job creation, was fourth from the bottom, because he had raised taxes and he'd opposed RomneyCare. And RomneyCare is the precursor to Obamacare. And Romney's own senior staff guy was quoted, I think it was a Newsday, as saying that they're in essence the same bill.
So I conclude from your response there that in Thursday's debate, this will be the Newt Gingrich that shows up, not the Zen Newt Gingrich of last night.
Right. But last night I thought it was very useful to let people see how desperate Romney is and how his new attack debate coach had taught him to say dishonest things in rapid fire in order to set up a stage. I think you'll find Thursday night we'll do just fine. And I think, frankly, the people of Florida are rapidly concluding they do not want somebody who, by Republican standards, is a liberal, and they don't want somebody who clearly couldn't debate Barack Obama and succeed.
Why is it, Newt? I mean, you've been around for so long, and I've known you, since maybe 1994. I believe all of you deserve great respect and credit for what you've put yourself through, your family through, etc., over the last year plus. But there are a lot of people who are just absolutely apoplectic at the idea that you would be the nominee. I mean, friends of mine, George Will. We have friends of mine at Fox News. We have all these writers, except Tom Sowell, who I'm sure you read the Tom Sowell piece today, who said this might be exactly the formula we need now. But why are so many of these very respected conservatives just recoiling at the notion of your being the nominee? I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, sure you have. We go back to 1980 and the people who said that Ronald Reagan's program was voodoo economics. In 1980, the Republican establishment preferred George H.W. Bush and John Connally and looked with horror at the idea of Reagan. In 1976, they supported Gerald Ford against Ronald Reagan. In 1964, they melted down over the prospect of Goldwater. I mean, the Republican establishment wants somebody who will pleasantly and calmly manage the decay. They do not want somebody who is going to take the risk of breaking up the Washington insider system. And they know from my past that I am, in fact, prepared to try to actually change Washington, not just preside over it.
Is there a way that you... we talked about the alliance back in Iowa, and that was obviously an incredibly important driving story for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Is there any way that you and Ron Paul could work together in the future? Do you see that on the horizon?
Look, on the Federal Reserve and on sound money, I think Ron Paul has said a lot of things that are pretty darn smart. And I think there's an area there where we could talk together. I also think on his call to review all of our overseas basing and all of our overseas spending, well, I don't reach the same conclusion he does. I think the idea of a fundamental rethinking of all that is a good thing, and I think that it's an area where we disagree with him.
Would you put him in your administration, Newt, down the road?
And on Iran.
Would you put him in your administration?
Well, I think there'd be a role for him. I don't know exactly whether I'm not sure put him in the administration is necessarily
ask him
the right way to approach it. But I do think that his values and his goals would be important, and I think he'd play a major role at the convention, which the McCain people did not get him.
Oh, very interesting. And Santorum, you seem to be saying nice things about a lot of people last night, including Rick Santorum, who was down quite a bit in the polls, although he took up the gloves on RomneyCare last night and hit that pretty hard. Any conversations with your staff and Rick Santorum's staff?
No, but Rick and I have been friends for many, many years. Rick does have a few will be a significant player, whatever happens. Mm-hmm. Just in Iowa, and frankly was the beneficiary of the attacks on me. And he is, I think, got a lot of key ideas, particularly on manufacturing and on foreign policy. My
staff just handed me this fact check by Associated Press on the balanced budget issue. You said that 4 years straight there were budget surpluses, but in fact they say there were actually 2 because the budget surpluses were actually 98 through 2001, but you left Congress in 1999. What do you say to that? I say that the Balanced Budget Act of 1997 is what led to the 4 balanced budgets, and there were no major changes in budgeting between that and the time of the attack on 9/11, and that's why you had a momentum that was going on, and it sustained us getting to balanced budgets. But the key was the Act of 1997, which Bill Clinton and I negotiated. I get it. So when you say when I was Speaker, I just think you might want to just change that wording. But I see what you're saying. When I was Speaker, we negotiated the Balanced Budget Act, which led to 4 consecutive balanced budgets. That would make me happy. I think that's right. So, Speaker Gingrich, you're in this race. You're in Florida. You're about tied in some of the polls with Romney, margin of error. You're up 5 in another. But Romney has dumped $13 million in television and radio ads in total. You so far have spent $354,000 super PAC money and $145 on Fox News. Are you going to start spending more money on these ads? Oh, I suspect. I think we. I just read that the super PAC actually has another $5 million just came in yesterday, so I think a lot of things will happen. But remember, there are 2 polls out that show me up by 8 and up by 9, so I think this will all continue. Do you iron your own clothes as well, Newt?
No.
Okay, good. That's an inside joke.
There are limits to my commitment.